Kia ora and welcome everybody to another episode of Big Life Mindset. It is my absolute pleasure today to have a very special guest whose name is Stormy Kara. You can look actually. You can look at that one, you can look at that one, you can look out the window.
Yeah, I think I'm going to look that way.
Okay, yeah, because it's a bit like emotionless looking into that small thing, isn't it? And otherwise you're kind of staring at yourself. The reason I wanted to catch up with Stormy is because there's maybe 3 or 4 names. So just kind of dialing it back half a step. I've got an interest in tattoos, even though I have none. But my interest stems from, I'm born and bred in New Zealand. However, I've seen a massive resurgence in the number of people, particularly from New Zealand, who are just like me, maybe can't speak Māori, Cook Island Māori, and want to remain connected to the culture, and so have been coming back to the islands to get tattoos done. And the tattooing seems to be act as a bit of a bridge between that person and our origins. Now, whenever you have a conversation with anybody about tattooing on the islands, there's 3 or 4 names that come up consistently, and you're one of them. No doubt. So, Stormy's very kindly welcomed me into his studio. Where are we, Stormy?
Main Road, Panama.
Cool, Main Road in Panama. And what's your studio called?
So the studio is under Kareha, Polynesian Art Gallery. Mm-hmm. The idea was to get a lot more art and artists in than just being a tattoo studio.
Cool.
But then all of my stuff comes under Pacific Inc.
All comes under Pacific Inc. Yeah. Awesome. And what does Kareha mean?
We made it up actually. When
cool.
Me and one of my friends who I carved with in Aotearoa, his last name is Tareha and my last name is Kara. And then I think at one point we were looking at Karaha, but then we found out in Swahili it means disgusting.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And then so we played around with the word again. And then Kare obviously is a friend, and Ha we liked because it was the breath of life. So we kind of coined it to represent our friendship stemming from our origins, which was art, carving for clothing.
Man, that's awesome. I love that. And then where did the Pacific Inc. Aspect of it come in?
Funnily enough, I was just kind of under Stormy's tattoos for a few years, which I didn't like, and I kind of had just fallen into that place. And then when I realised I had to have my own entity off of my uncle, because I was still kind of half apprenticing for him, and I really wanted the initials PI, and then almost the week that I decided that I'll go with Polynesian Inc., the boys down the road, Nick Boy had named his studio Polynesian Tattoos, so I was like, I can't be Polynesian Inc. That's going to be too confusing, so we went with Pacific Inc., yeah, which I like, and it's now I've learnt about branding and things, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad it's shorter.
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm starting to learn a bit about that myself.
Yeah.
And so how long have you had the studio open for?
So this one here has been open, this is like the 6th year, but 3 of those years I've been stuck in New Zealand during the duration of COVID. Mm-hmm. But before that, we've had different venues throughout the island, just kind of moving around. And then when I left to go carve, I had to leave for another 5 years. So all up, Pacific Inc.'s about 18 years old.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you've been in the game for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of dawns on you one day when you realise you've now been doing it more than half of your life.
Man.
Yeah.
Man. And so behind Pacific Inc., I mean, that's, I guess, some of the artistic journey you've been on. But what's a little bit about you? So you've lived in New Zealand for a while as well?
Yep, so I was born and raised in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Born in Hawke's Bay, raised in Palmerston North mostly. Mm-hmm. And then moved here when I was 17 to learn from Uncle T. Mm-hmm. So Tini Pikipo is my uncle and I guess my mentor through Tatau. And then when he asked me to come, I was only 14, and then I decided we decided as a family that I'd wait till I finished school.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of art subjects in school, and that wasn't a thing that happened here. Like art is one class, and it's largely painting and drawing, whereas art in my college in Palmy was, I did photography, art history, ceramics, graphics. We did everything we could.
Right.
Clothing. So it was something that I just wanted to wait for me to finish school, and I finished school when I was 17 and pretty much come over the next February or March, I think I came over that year.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned T. Pekapo. So he's another one of the names that, if you have any conversation about tattooing in the Cook Islands, his name comes up a lot as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was obviously not just an influence for you, but I guess the road to getting into tattooing.
Yeah, so I grew up with him coming back to Aotearoa. So we're a big blended family. He's actually my mother's first husband. So my 3 older sisters are his daughters.
Okay, okay.
And then I was actually whāngai from his younger brother into the family that I was raised with now, which is why I'm a kara and not a Pekapo.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of grew up seeing it often, and I didn't realise it wasn't a normal thing for a lot of people to see tattoos be done. And yeah, when he needed an apprentice, I found out later when I came here, because I'm from a really big family. So my grandmother's a witchman. So
actually?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so she's from the Witchman line, Uaba line. And, here it is picked from about 140 of us back then. But it was nice. He said to me later on, that it was more about finding an artist that wanted to do it rather than someone that just needed to do it to stay out of trouble. Because we have a lot of that too, where a lot of our people send their kids back here when they start getting into too much trouble. Which doesn't always work out as well as they probably think, because the island is small and you can still do that stuff.
Yeah, right.
So he asked me and I came over. And I think the plan originally was to learn and then go back to Palmy. And it was about 3 months here. I wanted to stay here for good. Yeah, so I fell in love with the place.
I'm not even going to ask why. I mean, you only have to look. It's just so beautiful. The sea breeze, the coconut trees, and the Pacific Ocean out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a surreal feeling, because up until that point I hadn't really done much with my Cook Island lineage. I'd grown up New Zealand Māori, learning all of that. And so coming back here was almost the introduction to my Cook Island side at 17, which was huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, particularly overseas audience, won't realise that there is quite a large separation between the two. There's a lot of similarities, obviously.
Yeah.
What have you found were some of the differences between the two, between Cook Island Māori and Aotearoa Māori?
I guess schooling and things in Aotearoa, and then coming back here and talking to my nana who's from here, and we would say things like, she'd talk about Hawaii, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the place no one knows where it is. It's like a mystical land where the Māori came from. And she's like, are you stupid? My Hawaii is Rarotonga. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's where Hawaii is? And she goes, no, it's everywhere. And so it's really matter of fact, some of that stuff here. It's like, no, your Hawaii is where you're from. Where are you from? If your boat came from Hawaii, then where's the boat from? And it just kind of was like,
yeah.
These people here have just lived in their culture so much that it's not a big light bulb moment for them. Because, that's what they say. Like, what do you mean? No, could be from here. His mother was from, And I love that. And that was the big thing where I started piecing things together. Like, I guess the hierarchy for me in cultures, where I learned, the Cook Islands actually came from an older culture than Aotearoa Māori. And even that, like that, we call ourselves Māori here, and everyone associates Māori with anyone from New Zealand. I'm indigenous to New Zealand, where it's not just New Zealand, it's all of us. And that's one of the things that I find when I talk to a lot of our Māori from Aotearoa. Over here, we call ourselves Māori, and then you guys have to are identified as the New Zealand Māori. Yeah, so we know that you are Māori, but you're just not of this land. So it's quite confronting, I think, for a lot of people that have always grown up and thought that was the only way. Maui's from New Zealand. And it's like, no, you guys are the last populated. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be in a time now where everybody's starting to explore into that.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're getting a lot more visitors from Kuriko Papa and Kohanga Reo even, coming over to teach their babies about going back into the islands. And
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and learning our Polynesian history as New Zealand Māori as well.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Right?
But then it's easier to get to Rarotonga, and I always say to people, we're like the BP for the Pacific. So for my family, when we would have to go back to Mangatautari for my dad's side, we're all from the lower North Island, so we would all meet at Taupo BP.
Yep.
And then we would go together to Cambridge.
Yep.
And then, so for me, Rarotonga was like the BP station that all the waka came to meet at, and then they all carried from here on to Aotearoa. But it was only really Takitumi that came from here, to my knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And so do you see, that kind of almost that resurgence of people back in New Zealand, back in Aotearoa, wanting to come back and make those connections? Do you see that translating into the art as well?
Yes. Yep. So it was an interesting time, because when I came back, it was still pretty new. Uncle T had been doing it for many years, like where he could. He wasn't full time at the very start. And then he was a voyager as well, so a lot of his designs and research came from actually visiting these islands that we kind of read about or talk to people from. And then kind of coming back here and realizing, these people want to recognize themselves as Cook Islanders now. Because if you went to New Zealand and you wanted to recognize you're from the island, you usually settled with Samoan, which was they had their tautau up and running. They were more than any of us, and still is, practicing it. So you would find a lot of Cook Islanders like, I'll get that. So people don't know that. So people don't confuse me for being New Zealand Māori. So they know I'm from the islands. And then it was a step for us to go, well, actually, your islands have their own designs too, and their own stories. So let's go back even further. And some people will come with knowledge that they're from the Cook Islands, but they don't actually know which island. They don't realise that Rara is just one of 15. That Rarotonga is kind of like the capital city, and then there's all the rest of them. And so sometimes we have to give them something to start with, to start their journey with, and then they can go find more, come back and add to it.
Wow.
So it becomes a bit of a journey within growing their tattoos as well.
Yeah, a journey for the person as well.
Yeah, big time. So that's kind of been my big focus for the last good part of about 8 years now. Yeah, just focusing in on bringing it back for our people.
Nice.
As opposed to, I guess, just doing anything that I would consider tattoo. I decided, about 8 years ago was where I went, I want to do tattoo. I want to focus in on moko, and kind of pay tribute to everything that I lineaged to.
Nice.
Yeah, and then put down things where if people come in and want kanji, I'm like, well, I'm not Chinese. I actually do not know what that says. Samoan as well. There's a bit of a fad at the moment of like the henna style work, which is based in Indian culture. That's not my culture. I don't understand it. We can make some stuff that looks like it, but we're essentially doing to other cultures what we're asking to stop happening to us.
Yeah, right.
So my idea was to just stop.
Yeah.
And admit that I'd done things in the past. I'd done mandalas and stuff like that. But you get to a point where you learn more, you grow, and then you can say, okay, I'll stop now. I don't need to do that. I've got such an abundance of cultures within my New Zealand, Māori, Cook Island, Tahitian lines that I can focus on that and that be plenty.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to the journey that you've been on as well.
Yeah.
And how you evolved, I guess, as a person.
Yeah.
So you use the word tatou, and for people who've never heard that word before, why that word?
So tatou for us is what we would use for this type of work. Tatou means to read. In simplest form. Tātatou, my understanding is what I am. So I'm a practitioner. I'm the author of your stories. And then what you wear is your story. So ideally what we should be able to do if we went back and we all had an understanding of the designs, is I could look at your arm and go, oh, you're from my island, which is what this one does a lot. Like,
this is the one on your right forearm?
Yes, so this is the paruru, which is Mayan in concept, and you kind of see it with the checkerboard, but we can spot each other from as far as we can see it. And it's been really cool to have that and to feel that and to talk to people about why we did it. Like paruru originates from our warriors wrapping their arms up in battle with matting, which is the squares. And you have to kind of understand that back then the tools were limited. So to represent matting, they did, white or skin and then tattoo. So it was a way to represent the woven mats. We could do that a lot more detailed now because we have the tools. For me personally, I prefer to go back to the squares because they're identifiable in a heartbeat. And it also represents... Yeah, so our warriors would wrap themselves up. Obviously, if you went into battle, that would become your shield.
Yep.
And so we talk to people about what it is that they're protecting now. So if you're wearing some sort of protection, then you obviously have an idea of what you're protecting. It could be your lineage, it could be your knowledge. When we talk about people being warriors, we still have people that go to battle, people that fight for a living, which might be kind of... It's a little bit yes, but no. And then so I talk to people, we're all fighting for something. Weapons nowadays don't necessarily mean we're sparing each other and killing each other, but our weapons can be some of the things that we're doing, like your knowledge base, your language. You can use that as a weapon, which we find quite often. And having all of those and knowing how to harness it, and then take it out into the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when people are coming back and they're looking for, I guess they might have a thing in their mind of, I think I want this, and maybe is there any kind of education aspect to it where you have to kind of say, oh, actually, what you're asking for is A, but what you're really talking about that I think that you're asking for is B. Like, is there any separation between the two?
Yeah, sometimes. I try and I don't know how to explain that, but try not to chop people down, especially when it could be the biggest thing to even ask if they can wear it. And I get it all the time. I'll have people say, I don't even know if I deserve to wear it. I'm not really Kokalan. My grandmother was. And I'm like, when you are. Like, whether you like it or not. You wake up Kokalan every single day. No one can take it away from you. You can't give it away. It's something that it's inherited. It's not earned. So when they come in, some people might ask for, even like they'll want something on their forearm. But then as we're talking, I'm thinking, oh, paruru might be more suited, but that's going to take about 4 to 6 hours. Maybe you want to think about another placement, so then you don't come back later on and go, actually, I do want this, but now I've got, some flowers and things going on my forearm. So I have been having those conversations just to prep them in case they do want further on in the journey, how to do that, and to kind of think at the bigger picture. Yeah. I had a guy come in recently, and he lives here, and he wanted to get a teardrop on his face. His son was kind of like rolling his eyes. And I said, well, what's it for? And he says, oh, it's for me because I never got taught my language. So it's my sadness that I carry that I haven't learnt my language. And I said to him, well, I haven't either. Like, I'm still in my process of learning Aoreo. And then I come back and I realize I've learnt 7 different dialects, but only partially. And I said, well, until we die, we've still got a chance to learn it. So there's no need to be sad about it. We can just use it as I guess, something to propel us forward and why we need to or why we want to, because it obviously hurts. So then use that in a way to go out and practice your language,
Nice.
Yeah. So that was cool, because then he didn't come in for his teardrop. I said to him, let's just get started on something and put the baseline down, where you're from, which islands you're from, and that was cool. Yeah.
You see, that's it's kind of the long game, isn't it? Like, rather than just looking at a piece of like a tattoo in isolation and kind of one-off, you're kind of weaving multiple storylines together. Yeah. And that's, I guess at this point in time, what I find in our industry is we're getting people that want to just come and just get a sleeve because it looks amazing, and they do. They look incredibly beautiful, but then they find heaps of the story and they've already run out of room. Or they then get that on the other arm, and now this one that looks beautiful but didn't have really any context other than I want to have island designs on me. You can kind of, I guess, end up going too far on your first step. Okay.
So even if we talk to people, like if you want a full sleeve one day, we just know that from the start. So we can either map it out, so it can always be extended. We do that a lot when people are including their children or their grandchildren. You never know when that's going to end. So you can always add, they'll come back and they've had 2 more kids and they've got another grandbaby. So they'll add that onto the story. Yeah.
Do you see much separation between... it's just something you mentioned earlier about the different islands as well. So this is kind of distinctive to Mangaya.
Yep.
Do you see the same thing with Achu or Mauke, Mitiauro, that kind of thing?
So as far as what I've been taught, and I try and make a habit of not telling anybody that they're wrong. Because I know that I haven't been in every single circumstance of every.
Sure. It's kind of based on your understanding, right?
So I always say, like, from what I've been taught, from who's taught me and what I've observed, Mangaya held a lot of our own designs. When it came to the introduction of Christianity, there was a lot of, I guess, negotiations where we kept our designs, we maybe put it more so into the carvings, and you'll find that in Mangaya, it's in the churches. Our churches are heavily carved, and a lot of our designs have been maintained there. So when it was time to make the transition back, it wasn't that far gone. Where some of our other islands, it's been completely gone. So it was a very different way of introducing Christianity to the Cooks, because we're not like most of the other Pacific islands where it was forced on us. From what I've been told, we're very adaptable people, and sometimes we adapt almost at our own demise.
Right.
Yeah, because we are, and like when we do presentations and stuff, if we're amongst people that aren't all Cook Island, I'll say to them, like, think of your Cook Island friend. I can guarantee you, when you take them somewhere, they make friends. Everyone ends up loving them. They're just the most. The part of the party that everyone loves to talk about, or, they all remember them because we can basically merge into whoever we need to be to help the situation work.
Gosh, that's frighteningly accurate.
Yeah. And it's really funny because they were like, oh my gosh, yes, that's my bro.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And then we started talking about characteristics of the islands. And again, this is my observations. This is my... Yes, living here, I used to think coming here and not being born here was a big disadvantage for me. But I think not being born here, I can look at things from 2 different perspectives, and not be caught up that, I can't change that I wasn't brought up here. That's something my grandmother decided very long ago. But we can see how it plays out in their behaviour. And then, like, I've observed people from my island. So, for those who know a little bit about Mangaya, Atu as well, as they were very much warfaring islands.
Yes.
They were known for their warriors.
Yeah.
I've heard stories of Tahiti and the Marquesas coming to test their warriors here, because it was just about creating the strongest, most elite race. And that's what we did. We fought very well, almost too well, because we would fight over almost anything.
Yeah.
And so one of the talks I said, we were talking about Mangaya, and I feel more comfortable to talk about it because it's my island, my grandfather's island. And I'll say to them, they're usually very mellow people. Very, very soft-spoken typically. But when they snap, they snap. And they can, like Mangayan people will see red. And it's a really hard thing to pull yourself back from just going straight to, well, I'm going to kill you now. and then learning, and it's funny because now we get all the science that comes out, and it's like, did you know your DNA remembers things? And we're like, yes. Yeah. For like ever we've known that. That's what we call culture. And so I'll say to people like, that's, if we understand that part of us, we also can understand that that's not what we want to be today. It's not helpful today for us to snap and to see red and ruin everything that's positive in our life for a moment. And like I was saying, that's not where our weapons need to be drawn now. And so we have that. And then I had one of my friends was like, oh my gosh, that's my ex-wife. Like, she was amazing, but when she would snap, it would just be all over.
That was it.
Yeah, and then I was like, well, it's in our DNA. We can't stop it, but we can understand it. And then quite a few of the people in my life are from Aitutaki. And what I was taught really, really early when I got here, they're like, oh, Aitutaki people are happy people. You hear them before you see them. And I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, yeah, they're always laughing and stuff. And then one of my uncles was like, yeah, because no one had to fight on Aitutaki. So if you don't have to fight, then you just, make babies.
Yeah, sure.
Eat. And, there were things, they were very obedient with their ariki. They listened very well to the rules. The story of One Foot Island is like a very clear example of what happens if you don't listen to the rules. And so they just project that as people.
I'm not familiar with the One Foot Island story.
Oh, One Foot Island,
which is a beautiful place.
Yeah, so there's a ra'ui there where you weren't supposed to fish, or if I get it wrong, it's like a really chopped up version. That's where the ariki fish, so that fish was reserved for them. And it was about a father and a son who basically were starving, so went into the ra'ui to fish and got caught by the king's warriors. So the father paddled the canoe to the island. I don't know the Māori name for it. It will have one. Knowing that they were coming for him. So they were going to come and kill whoever it was that was fishing. So he told his son to run straight into the middle of the island and climb the highest tree. And then so his son did that, and then he followed. So he only stood on his footprints, got to his son, and carried on. Which resulted in obviously them thinking there was only one person on the island. So it was a story about self-sacrifice for your children. And that's why they call it One Foot.
That's badass. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I heard that before I went there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's a beautiful story, and that's what we kind of say, even though it's kind of crazy to think they killed someone for fishing, for getting a couple of fish when they were starving. It's like, well, the story comes from probably one of millions back then. But it was something where we can go, oh, well, this obviously talks about the sacrifice of a parent for your child. That's an unconditional love sort of thing. And clever thinking to think, oh, you run, I'll run in your footsteps, and they will never know who was on the boat. Yeah. And so the son obviously, and if I'm correct, there is a lineage to that story. Wow. So the son got back, told the mum what happened, and that's how everybody knows what happened.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you see many people from the outer islands coming to Rarotonga to get tattoos, or are they getting them in the islands? What's happening
I don't know of any tattooists on the islands. Sometimes we hear of them. Sometimes there's people just doing them kind of, I guess, like you would have had in the 80s in New Zealand.
Yep.
You know, making their own machines up and stuff. I know there was one guy in Aitutaki who would do people sometimes, but typically if they come on the island, it's one of the things, I guess, I can only assume when you live on a small island and you come to this is Auckland, this is the city, there's all the things that you can do so you can get tattooed. And we used to get quite a few from the northern group when they would come on the boats. And it would be small things, which was really cool. It was a time where we could do trade rather than, because a lot of the time they didn't come from making a lot of money, and you don't want to take it, but you want to give them something to take home. Yeah, one time I did this one on a guy, and he just like reached into his bag and gave me this handful of pills. And I was like, oh, that's a bit much. Like, it was only $50. And he's like, no, just take it. And his bag was filled with them.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So he was just like, oh, I'm just going to see what people will let me do with this. Yeah. And then I took one of them into to get put onto a clasp, and they said that one alone they probably would sell in the shop for about $250. Yeah. So he was just carrying around with this sack full of black pills. They weren't the A-grade ones, but he was just like, oh, yeah, here you go.
Oh, wow.
Is that enough? And I was like, that's a lot. He's like, oh, just take it. It's fine. Yeah, he was really proud. But I don't know what the attitude is there. Like holding that stuff and then trying to explain to your elders who are still very staunch in their belief that it's not something that we should practice can be hard. Yeah. When I first got here, it was still pretty weird, like tourists like it, and our local people were kind of getting into it. And then I think what I noticed when I came was there was a huge influx of our waine coming to get stuff done, and a lot of the conversations I had was they wanted stuff, they just didn't want a guy touching them.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Which was cool because we had mamas and
that's cool.
yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah,
it's interesting that contradiction you mentioned earlier about the tattoo and the design of those featuring and the carvings that are within the church environment, where my simple understanding is the church did not look favourably on tattoos themselves. And so have you found that it's kind of been over time that's broken down, that there's been less of that pressure?
I think for speaking of our people, they're still quite respectful. I very, very, very rarely, probably once or twice in my whole career here, have ever had anyone underage try and get something done, because if mum or dad said no, they'll wait till they're 45 and dad passes, and then they'll get something done. So there's a deep respect for what their parents put in place, which is quite exciting for me, because you also know that person who's now a grandmother won't put that barrier in place for their grandchildren. So we're just waiting for the generations to kind of stem down and have a little bit more education with it. Funnily enough, I have quite a few, religious leaders that I've tattooed.
Actual?
Yeah. I'm not familiar with a lot of the reasons from the church why we're not allowed to get tattooed. But yeah, it's really cool, especially cultural. I have a couple of clients that live in Hamilton, and Poro are the pastors of Elm Church, and they came to one of my presentations. They're of Cook Island lineage, so he's the covers. She's Achuan, and they were starting to have this. The conversations we've had is you can have your culture and your faith. You don't have to pick. Obviously, a lot of their work reflects their culture, And it's not something that you need to say, oh, if I have this, I can't be that. And I guess people are realizing now you can have tattoos and not have gone to jail or be a criminal or do drugs, and they can be very artistic and they can be beautiful and they can remind you of things. So they had a really cool conversation where they were getting, because it's in Aotearoa as well, so they were getting some of their people come in with mokokauai and mataura, which is, they're not going to tell them you can't have that here. It was more about how do we understand why we have it, and that it's about our cultural belongings, it's about what our stories are, and accepting it into their church, which is really cool. And even here, a couple of our clients here have got pieces done. We do a lot of cover-ups, so maybe somebody is a pastor now, but once was an Harley Davidson enthusiast, because they don't all have Harleys either. They just get the Harley Davidson on the old arm. And then we've gone over it. So I've gone over it with, church-related things that are relevant to what they do now, their faith. It's cool. It's cool bridging those gaps too.
Yeah.
Because, with one pastor accepting it or one minister accepting it, the conversation for everybody that they're preaching to becomes a little bit lighter and a little bit more accepting of anything. Yeah.
You've got fascinating tattoos, by the way. What's it first? When you get a tattoo on you, who does it?
A lot of my friends have done mine. I've done a few of my own. My uncle has done a large part of my work for me. And some of my friends will do ones that I want done but can't reach myself. So there's actually only a few artists that have ever worked on me, I guess, and we kind of run in the same circle, so it's a lot of Indigenous artists doing their own work, and I guess being in each other's presence and stuff, it's nice to carry something of them with you as well,
And it makes you kind of on a similar wavelength.
Yeah. So it is one of those things when we go to our conventions and stuff, and it is just honestly meeting up with our mates, doing the stuff we love.
Yeah.
Sometimes trying to get work from them while you've got a booth, and you're like, oh, but I want to get work from you, and they're like trying to get work from yourself. So it's just like it's a cool time, and it's a hard sell to tell your partner like, oh, it's work. It's still work.
Of course.
It's still work. I'll make some money home.
What's this one on your ear, just in front of your right ear?
So when we went to Tahiti, we went to Tataui Moria, which was another Indigenous gathering. There were 3 pieces I wanted to get at the time. I knew there were 3 pieces I had to get at some point over there. And that was my ear, my neck, and my centipede in the end. And that one was done by Warren Tang. He is an artist in Bora Bora. And he was my booth buddy. So, I call them booth buddies because everybody that works next door to us, I'm like, we're going to be friends.
Yeah.
You don't know it yet, but we're going to be friends. And he was really cool. He spoke a bit of English too because they speak a lot of French there. And so it was cool to converse with him. And so in a nutshell, a lot of my life I've kind of not battled with, but I've had to try and mosey around the fact that our family are very gifted, I guess you would say, in like communicating with spirit. So speaking to those that have passed. And so that was what those 3 things were for me when I went there. One of them was my neck, and it was about speaking on their behalf. And then this one was about acceptance of listening. Because sometimes when you get told to do stuff and it doesn't sound super fun, you just ignore it and you take the long way around to go back to the same point where you actually should have just listened in the first place.
Oh my gosh, this is me.
Yeah, so I got this one and specifically on my ear. And it was a reminder to me, but also kind of paying homage to them that I will listen. I'm actively showing you that I will listen now. And then I will stop holding it back and feeling like people might judge me, or people might get freaked out by me if I say something that sounds wacko. And so that was about speaking it as well. Yeah. Yeah, so they're kind of like, even though you asked about that, they kind of bring into different things together. And yeah, so he was Tahitian. This is my friend Tyler Vayel, so she's Samoan. And then my centipede was done from a Filipino artist who does the hand poking. Yeah, so that goes all the way down.
And so the bits that kind of wrap around here, are they separate pieces, or that's
so this is a whole separate piece.
Yeah.
And then this piece was done. This was first. That was done second. Then my centipede, and then I just got this a few years ago.
Nice. And what is this aspect of it? What is this?
So this is what we call iparuru.
Iparuru?
Yep. And so this. Sorry, I forgot I had the microphone there. And so this is something that we are, I guess, restoring back for our Cook Island women. And so this was years and years and years sitting with one of my older sisters. My older sister Toyota, we had been told about these pieces that our people used to wear. She went to Mangaya and lived there as a child. She saw images, and it was just a fixation for her. That there was something that she knew she had to wear, and I was obviously in this industry, and so for years we mulled over what that would look like. That was kind of when we were going through the resurgence also of moko kauwai in New Zealand, and seeing everybody put in their 5 cents, like, well, you can't have that unless you're speaking Māori. And then we have our nannies going, what do you mean? Back in the days, that's all we spoke, so how can that be a rule? You know, so it's about, it was about trying to find a way around how do we tell people what this means. And so rather than go back and say, this is what it meant for them, we started again and said, from here on, this is the information. The worst thing I can do is not document what I'm doing. And so for the women that we have done, they get all the information and explanations, and they can grow on that, and they then become the resource of sharing it with other Cook Island women as well. So it's something that I'll strictly do only on our Cook Island Waini, but it is still very, very brand new for us, and having something that has a really deep meaning for us. And so I was always told our artists gave a lot of our designs into our weavers. Our weavers were the holders, and they wove it because it was still accepted, because it was the closest thing to clothing, the fabrics, tivai. And so it's based largely on the placement of a tifatara, which is what you would get at really important parts of your life, ceremonies, weddings, 21st, hair cuttings. They weave them and put them on your, like a crowning, my friend said. It's usually front and back. Yeah, so you'll find that heavily up in the northern group, which is, again, comes through our Tahitian lines that up there is very heavily influenced through the Tahitian bloodlines.
Man, that is deep.
Yeah. So now we do, if people, we have a few, the presentations that I talk about, I go out and I talk to people, and it's good. For me, I realised I couldn't just sit here and wait for everyone to come to Raro. Coming to Rarotonga isn't something that is affordable for everybody, but our culture shouldn't have to be whether or not you can afford it. And so I had made a decision a few years ago to start to travel to them. And we would go to Aotearoa. Whenever we would have someone, I would offer a presentation. So we would run it through, invite your whānau. We can all talk about it, invite the ones that don't think you should even get it, because maybe we just need to talk to them about why we get it now. And so there's 8 lines all up, and then depending on what stages you are in your life, then it would depend on how many you would fill and what designs they would fill. So the idea is the same, is that we would be able to see somebody and be like, oh, your grandma. like straight off the bat. Oh, you've got the same design as me. Are you from Mangaya as well? Yeah.
I love that when you talk about that the one on your arm. It's just like that instant recognition. Like this is this traces back, and now we're both on that understanding.
Yeah, and it was one of these things. Like I got my uncle T to do mine. I don't set people barriers, but I set myself a barrier, and mine was I wanted to go to Mangaya before I ever got it, and I did. And then I came back and I loved it. It was one of the most weirdest feelings to go somewhere you've never been and feel more at home than anywhere in the world.
I've heard this from several people. That's quite a buzzy experience.
Yeah. And I went there and I was completely against everything that I would typically do. I didn't know nobody. I had booked in for an accommodation. I knew they'd drop me off there, and I had 4 days with no technology, pen and paper, and was just going to go and be. So I came home and asked Uncle T, and he said yes. And then he says, I don't want to do the squares though, because they look manly. So should we do like flowers or something? And I just thought to myself, if my ancestors wrapped themselves up in flowers and tried to stop a spear, you would just smell really nice on the ground dead. So no, I don't need flowers to be feminine. And I said, no, I want the squares. So his compromise was to make them a little bit smaller, which I love. I love everything about it. And it was this big. It wasn't a sense of completion, but I knew that it was one big step towards something bigger. And then I used to go have breakfast every morning down at the Punanganui. And the first morning I had it, I was on my bike waiting to enter the road again, and this papa just drove past me. I didn't know him. I was waiting for him to go so I could pull in. And he drove past me and he just looked back and he goes, and I was thinking, hi, I don't know you. And as I looked down, he had two.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, he knows. Like, 9 hours was way worth it. Like for that one man who did not know me from a bar soap, to instantly go, oh, we're from the same place.
Yeah.
It was the most buzziest feeling, like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And it was that like, oh, I did what I was supposed to do. I'm listening. I am listening. And then the same time I called back in and I went to buy some bananas off one of our mamas down on the side of the road. But I was leaving in about 5 days. So I only wanted about 5 or 6 bananas for smoothies and stuff. And I said to her, can I buy that? It's $3. And she says, where's your bag? So I gave her my bag. And she just starts piling bananas, like 30 bananas into my bag. And I was like, oh, no, I just need a few. Like, no, it's okay. And she's like, no, take it. Just take it. She just kept putting it in. And then as she was talking, she was choking up. And I was like, no, I've only got $5. And she goes, no, you take it. I don't want money from you. And she grabbed my arm and she said, this is beautiful. I'm from Maya too, but I'm not brave enough to get tattoos.
Oh, man.
And I was just like, oh, and she goes, oh, you wear it well. Oh, this is cool. Can I take a photo so I can show my daughters? Because there was that assumption that women didn't wear it. And a lot of that stems from some pretty annoying places, a lot of kind of ourselves carrying on that colonial idea of what we did and what we didn't do. So it was really cool. We had a little bit of a chat. She took a photo to show her daughter, and then I just kind of went on my way. And I came home after those 2 experiences, and I just like, this is day 1 of wearing it. Like, this is buzzy. Yeah, that was the first day. She touched like a raw tattoo, and it was so sore. But she grabbed it, and I was just like, "This is cool. This is healing for you." Yeah. Because what I found,
and maybe for you as well.
Yeah.
Not maybe by healing, but there's an aspect.
Yeah, there was a part of me that was like, "This is what I wanted it to do," but I didn't realize it would do it the next day, like the very moment after people started to see me with wearing it.
Yeah.
And I had prepared for backlash just in case, people telling me, oh, you shouldn't wear that, women don't wear that.
Have you
it looks manly.
Have you experienced any backlash?
Oh, not personally. Well, yes and no, because a lot of it comes from, I guess, what they've also been told. If you've been told something, you're going to believe it wholeheartedly until you're proven otherwise. And there was somebody who had mentioned, and I guess in a way, this is where I stopped kind of engaging with people online. Because people will say whatever they want. It's kanohi ki te kanohi is where I deal better with people. And and then that Malayan side really came out, because he said, you don't even speak Malayan, you shouldn't wear that. And I said, well, you can come and take it from me and we'll tell you how Malayan that I am. And it was just like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
I don't come out the womb saying, oh, by the way, I'm Kukala Māori, I'd like to speak these languages.
Yeah.
Like if I came out and my family said we're speaking Mandarin, that's what I would speak.
Yeah.
And we would make our way back to the same path, I would imagine. Yeah. But then you also have to understand, for me, and understanding my clients, is that I knew they weren't Kukalan born, because that wasn't something that was widely pushed here. A lot of our people get really excited when our people are trying to learn more about their culture. I think sometimes the barrier in language can get misunderstood or misinterpreted as quite rude. Like my nana, when I said, oh, that's where Hawaii is, the mythical land. She's like, are you stupid? And I know she doesn't mean I am stupid. She's just meaning like, do you not know? Has no one taught you?
Yeah.
But because there is that language barrier, the way she translates it into English, it comes out really rude. And like a little bit, when you arrive and they're like, oh, you're getting fat. And you're like, oh, thank you so much.
Cool.
And like, yeah. They just say it.
Yeah.
And I've learned that too, having, like my partner is full Tongan, so English is a second language. And so some of the things he says will come out a little bit warped, but you're like, oh, okay, this is probably what you meant. And not to whakaiti him for trying. And my son would always laugh too, like, oh, they're so fresh. And I'm like, yeah, this is second language.
Yeah.
You don't mock anyone that's fresh.
Yeah.
Because they are literally speaking multiple languages.
Yeah.
And you're still on your one.
Yeah.
And I guess what I've found is people that speak multiple languages aren't the ones that will mock anyone for getting things wrong that are fresh.
No, that's so true.
Yeah, they don't, because they understand how hard it is to learn multiple dialects, multiple languages. Yeah, and it was an important thing for him. Like I said to him, you might think people sound funny because they speak English weird. Remember, English is their second language.
And English is a terrible language.
You go to Tonga, and he will speak, and you'll sound stupid. If we're trying to speak in their language, we would sound silly too, but you wouldn't want them to say it to us.
Yeah, that's right. So there has been this, I don't know if explosion is overstating it, but I watch TV now. If I'm watching, not that I do watch a lot of it, but if I'm watching the TV or a movie, you're seeing a lot more of these, I'll just call it Pacific theme or Polynesian themed tattoos. Aotearoa Māori, Tahitian, Samoan, Cook Island. What do you think is driving some of this?
I think if I look back to why my grandmother doesn't actually like tattooing. She's a very staunch Catholic. She wishes I painted flowers, and that was my living, which is funnily enough because Uncle T is her mother. Oh, she's Uncle T's mother. So from her stemmed two of the biggest pushes for our revival. But it all is based on, Moko, I don't want you to have no job. I don't want people to hurt you. I don't want them to belittle you. I want you to be okay and be safe. Whereas it's a different time now. And I can say to them, no, I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep employing myself. And a lot of our other people that are getting their tattoos now, that's not as much of a holdback that it used to be back in the days, where it was like you have to suppress any sort of cultural validation you wanted by getting your work done. You have to stuff that deep down and look like all of us and change your name, because it's hard for us to say, Mi'imitua. So we'll just call you Mary. Yeah, and so there was this time, I guess, like we spoke about, my Nana's generation were just this next level type of gangster because they travelled the oceans. There were no flights weekly back to Rarotonga.
Yeah.
There was like a boat every few months. And so they just come from that sort of thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is actually that. Like, it's okay, Nana. I'll always have somewhere to work. I'll always be able to provide. And people won't hurt me because my tattoos insult them. And if they do, then that's probably something else.
Yeah.
And we're stronger now that we're together. And so now you find the world's finding out that Polynesian tattoos aren't one size fit all. You can't take what's on the rock and put it on you. That's his family. You wouldn't go and write Uncle Albert across your chest if you didn't have an Uncle Albert. You know, and if we went back into a place where we all understood and realized and recognized it, if you did have designs that were very similar, you were probably of the same family, you would hope. Otherwise, you'd feel pretty silly. Yeah, so we have people come in and they want exactly the same, and I'll say to them, well, we can take that as an idea, but we'll put your story into it. So how many kids do you have? You know, where are you from?
Yeah.
What do you love to do? You're a surfer. Oh, great. So you'll probably want a lot of protection around the ocean, which is what we do with Shaksi. And then they realize, oh, this is even better than what the rock got because this is mine.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to walk down the road and see someone else with the exact same thing because their story would have been different still. Yeah. And then, so now we're getting a lot of, I guess, non-Pacific Island getting our work done. In some spaces, that's fueling our people to want our stuff more because now these people we were trying to please are getting our stuff. We're more free to go and be ourselves too. On the other hand, it's also angering some people because they were never allowed to get our stuff. And now these people are allowed to get our stuff. And then we're the bad guys because we're putting it on them. So it is about conversation, I think, and understanding, like, that's why you're angry. You're angry because you always wanted it and you were told no. No, you have to stay, you know, you have to stay out of anybody's bad books. You have to be the model citizen, get a good job, do all of that. And that does not involve wasting money on tattoos or whatever. But then now we're getting, for lack of a better word, the pop are coming in and getting our work because they realize, oh, this is beautiful. And I'll say to them too, like I've got a board of designs that I'd put on anybody. And I'll say to them, any of those is fine. They've all got meanings. You can tell me what you like. But there are some designs I will not put on you. And that's not to try and tell you can't have something. It's because as a culture, we give so much to the world. There's some stuff that we need to keep for ourselves, like the paruru. If you don't, like the a paruru, if you don't lineage here for myself, there's no way I will give it to you. Yeah. And that's something for my people. But I'm like, there's heaps of stuff though.
Yeah, but there's like 16,000 other things that you can put on you, so don't sweat it.
And most of the time they're absolutely fine with it when they realize, like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of getting our Cook Islands specifically. They don't want to get confused with being Tongan or Samoan. So they want our stuff. And so they're realizing we do have little changes in some of our designs because they speak of our legends. Or I was told about Mayan and Achuan designs being quite heavy and dark. And I had an amazing uncle when I first got here, Papa Exum, and he would say some really, like, again, real blunt things that would just simmer and I'd realize later on in life. So he was always saying, of course you want them to be seen from far away. Those are the people you want to see from far away. You might not know if they're here for trouble. So I'm like, oh, because we fought all the time. So I was like, that's why.
Man, I can't wait to see some of these, the Achuan ones in particular.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some, I actually saw this photo and it was, you know, I don't know, it basically had 16 or 17 Achu warriors and they're all standing there, and some of them wearing helmets. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, man, whatever is going on in their mind is like full warfare style, like, you know, so even down to a tattoo, like I'm putting down a tattoo, it's going on heavy and it's going dark.
Yeah.
So you best recognize, like, I'm here for business.
And the mix of things, you can recognize where I'm from, whether we're on the same side, or whether or not we're supposed to kill each other.
Yeah.
And I guess when you break it like down psychologically with tattooing, if you've got really heavy, big pieces done on you, you know you've taken pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can go, oh, okay, they've done a few things.
Yeah.
I might just back out of this one. Yeah, and because it was really cool. Like every now and then I'll get people come up after I talk and they'll give me just little gems because I focus on my islands for now. And from enough of them, it's going to take me a while. And then someone said to me like, oh, have you heard about Mitiaro? And I was like, oh, I haven't really researched into Mitiaro yet and I have not been there. And he said, oh, I was doing some research and apparently when it's in Cook's journals that when they arrived to the island of Mitiaro, they thought they weren't the first Europeans to be there because they were all wearing black boots up to their knees. And so they thought, oh, someone's already been here, we'll go see who it is. They weren't boots, they were heavily tattooed, so black from the knee down. If you look through Polynesia, that's a more of a Marquesian style. And so you would probably find the root and the reasons why they would do that back with the Marqueses. And if you're from one of the Ngāputori, so Moke, Mitiaro, Archie, you're from all of them probably.
Yeah.
They just...
There's a lot of intermingling.
Yeah, there's a lot of intermingling. Right? Except for when the Cook Island games are on and you choose your island.
Yeah, you choose carefully.
Yeah. You choose your island or you swap from last year because Nana got angry at you because you represented your papa's island. Yeah, so just little things like that. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool to know. The last one I was in Tokoroa and one of the papa, he was actually the orematua for the whole event. And he said to me, if anybody's my age and grew up on Aitutaki, they'll remember there was a man with facial tattoo. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I can't tell you what it looks like. I can't tell you what it meant. But within his life, so he was very, very young, and he's probably, I would say, in his 70s and his 80s now, he was like, I saw this man go from someone that was quite high regarded to they can't wait for him to die because when he dies, it dies with him. He's the last one to wear it. And then he said, what happened to our designs? And I said, why don't? I just assumed that without practicing them, we lost all of our resources. And he said, we burnt them. I burnt some when I was a kid. It was something that if we found anything that had records of our designs, we would happily burn them because we were burning a part of our history we did not want. And he said, so he's become a orematua now, but he goes, it never sat right with me. And now you've explained it was just how we communicated. It wasn't about intimidating each other. It wasn't about being a prisoner or being anti-God or anti-spiritual. It was just an identification, and it was how we told stories. And now he's kind of learning that a part of it. And he's an amazing, amazing man. And he takes like classes on cultural identity and things like that. So all these little things come in every time we speak to people.
Yeah.
And speaking to people was way out of my comfort zone, but I know I have to do it. Yeah.
Oh man, you do it well. You do it very well.
I didn't used to, and I hope that I get better at it. But yeah.
Well, you're on a podcast.
Yes.
So you're definitely making steps in any direction you want. Before I wrap it up, I do want to hear like your thoughts on. So that's kind of the journey that tattooing has been on to get to this point. What do you think the next steps or the future looks like for Cook Island tattooing, Polynesian tattoos?
I guess something that I'm really lucky to have spent quite a bit of time in around those circles that I was talking about with other Indigenous artists. And that's where the movement is pulling away from, I guess, wanting to be accepted by the Western world because they'll use us for what they need to, for what it looks like. They think it's cool it's good shading, where it's like, wow, we never used to traditionally say shade, so this means something different for us. What I'd like to see in the future, specifically for our Cook Island artists, is for us to start to work together and be very firm that the only ones that should be practicing our designs are us. Because some designs are going out, and I've met people personally that have had designs on them, and it's been like maroitiki, which is I guess people know it as the K motive. It's a Mangaean design. It's a Mangaean war design, and they say, "Oh, look, I've got this," because they know I'm a Cook Island artist. I'm like, "Oh, cool, are you from Maya?" They said, "No," and I used to get really upset, like, "Oh, are you stupid? Why would you do that? It's not from your island." But they don't know. So they're just clutching at something that's from where their islands are from, but not realizing, because, they've gone to New Zealand Māori artists that have just Googled something up, or they know that something's a Cook Island design, not realizing that these islands are so vast, one may not make sense for the other. One is heavily reliant on the ocean, the other is heavily reliant on the land. Some of them eat birds out of the sky. Some of them, it's a steady diet of fish. So I would love to kind of have us work together, because I can kind of bounce between, I guess, both of my papanga is in Cook Islands Māori, New Zealand Māori. A lot of COVID had me focusing a lot more on my moko side, and then realizing we need to actually pull it and see who's out there, and talk to our Cook Island artists, our Cook Islands people, and say, if I'm not here, you can go see them. And then within Aotearoa, it's been really cool, because I guess putting yourself out there, they make themselves known to you. So the last convention we had, I was really excited to get Opita from Tokoroa, so Ops Tattoos, or Ops Tatau. He came and was one of the other two booths that were representing the cooks. And it was buzzy, because they were like, "Yay, we're here, we've got a team of two." But it's, one more than it usually is.
Nice.
And then it was really cool for us. The organisers, which this was in Mount Maunganui, and the organisers had actually got a Cook Islands dance group to perform. And so while we were working, because there was performances going on throughout the whole 3 days, then while we were working, the Cook Islanders were on, and we were bummed because we were still working on somebody. But then as they started doing it, we could hear the drums, we could hear the singing. The MC was hilarious, which was kind of like an uplifting feeling from what was happening with the other groups. And then you just see mobs of people starting to gravitate towards them. And I said to him, "Bro, this is really cool. Like, everyone's loving it. Like, there were a couple of groups up here and they didn't get crowds." And then I went out and had lunch later on, and I could hear the conversation. And I'm like, "Where's the Cook Islands? That was really cool. They're funny. Are they from Samoa?" And then someone else saying, "No, stupid, they're not Samoan. That's Raro." And I'm like, "Oh, this is cool. Like, our people are being represented." And it was always hard for us to get recognition, because we're up against like the mecca of Samoan tatau, which come in there. They come as a massive group, and they communicate within each other. Who's going? Who's doing this? They have a lot of artists to pull from, and then Aotearoa Māori have all of their moko artists. Also Tahiti, they have quite a few as well. And it was nice to be like, "Yay, we're up there! Like, we're getting on the poster now. We're being recognised." And Cook Islanders are starting to be like, "Oh, where are they? Look on the poster. Cool. There they are. They're booths."
Getting a profile, right?
Yeah, they're those booths. So they'll come over, and I'm hoping to get a few of us in some sort of groove where, if not all of us can go, at least I can kind of extend the invites out for those. If I can't go, then I know that we have a sort of a following that we can take to these events, because now I'm a mum of a new little girl. I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to go to all of these things for the next few years. I want to settle for her for a little bit. But yeah, we've got a few that we have in. There's Tynes in Auckland is another really cool artist that I've talked to, and is really passionate about learning our designs rather than just. But hopefully he'll come back, because that's the other thing when I say to people, go back to the islands. That's where you learn it. You don't learn it off Google. You don't learn it from books. You learn it from your people, and you get inspired by your own people and your own land. And then even down in Dunedin, there's Tere Moana, who I just met randomly at the end of another festival. He came over and just asked for a piece, and then, just got his details. So we keep in contact, and then if we have events coming up, then we can say, look, we're looking for a Cook Island delegation. Can we all come together? We all do our own thing under our own brands, but represent the cooks as a delegation.
Nice.
Yeah. And obviously our artists here. Uncle T's always kind of stressed to me that he's over it. He did his dash with travelling the world. Travelling the Pacific. And that was where he I asked him to come to Tahiti. I asked if there was a tohunga tatau from the Cook Islands, and I said, that'll be my uncle. I'll ask him. He said yes, and I booked his tickets. He gave me the money to book his tickets. And then a week out, I was like, oh, so you're still all good to come to Tahiti? And he's like, when? Oh, I can't go. I've got mongoose. And I was like, you gave me $900 to get your ticket. And he goes, oh, did I? No, we've got finals. So the mongoose is like the men's, I think they do everything, but it's all of the like masters. They do fitness, health, well-being and stuff for our tāne. Yeah, so we all know what the mongoose is. And he's like, oh, no, I've got mongoose. And so he just flat out refused to go and said, ask someone else. Ask your bro. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, what are you so worried about? Why do I have to go? And I said, because they want someone to talk about Cook Island's tatau. And then I say, in his very Cook Island way of handing it over, he goes, what the bloody hell have I been teaching you for? What a waste of my time if you can't go there and represent us. And I was like, oh, thank you very much. Like, that's cool. Wow. And then I left and was like, oh man, that was it. That was it kind of getting put onto my shoulders, and he can rest and know that it's the momentum that will be picked up and run with it as much as we can. Further on from that, my son and my niece Levi, I will take under and teach them one day. And so he's 10, she's 13 at the moment, which sounds crazy, but he's already in the mix of it. So
well, you were 14, right?
Yeah. I was 14 when I got told, and then, so from now I've just been teaching them the designs. He does stamps, so I've been able to take him to my conventions now, and he does stamps and learns the designs, and if they're Cook Island, he'll be like, oh, you should get this. This is from Atu. Yeah, and then, so that's my way of him starting to learn without getting a needle put in his hand yet. So he won't hold a machine for many years, but the rapport with people, getting to know people, being very proud, being a proud kid, and then putting it on kids too. They grow up going, one day I'm going to get this for real. Yeah. And my niece, so she's also half Samoan, and so as her teacher, I've always said to her too, I'll teach you Cook Island. You need to go further with your Samoan side, and whenever you do that, I'll support you with that too.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's not for me to teach you. Yeah. And also because Yaveta is also New Zealand Māori, I'm like, that's something that he will do, but not you. Yeah, and understanding that together they'll kind of be able to work as a unit there.
And so you can kind of see how, what do they call it, like the succession planning is taking effect or starting to kind of grow its base there, because as we all get older, right, then it gets to a point where actually what does the next iteration look like? What does the evolution of this work look like? Yeah,
and because I think for a large part of me, I pulled back and wanted to go back to traditional, so very basic designs, the more straight and triangular stuff that was something, from what I was told, it was like we had straight tools, so we had straight designs. And so if I do enough work in the traditional, then they get the freedom to start developing into the new and into playing around with what that means, because we've got a lot of mixed races as well. So we have people that come in that have got, people travel the world now. And so that's what I always say to my son and to my niece, like, what I give you is just a guideline. If you feel like it's not working for you, you break it open and you go with however you feel you need to. My son's got an affinity for traditional methods as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So we will hopefully get a bit more into that in the upcoming years, and just learning for him the relationship between carving and tattoo.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. That's awesome. So I guess if people come into Rarotonga and they're coming to get a tattoo, they're either going to, they've got an option of potentially get yourself, or who knows, in future days get one for yourself.
And I guess that's the part where I'm realizing a lot of our artists are tattooing into their very old age, and I guess the idea, like my uncle started when he was 30, so that's only a few years ago for me now, and he started kind of doing bits and pieces, whereas I started at 17 and we were straight into the thick of it, 12-hour days. So you learn to just really look after your health, because if I want to be 65 and still doing it and still loving it, I've got to make time for my family, put it into my kids, make sure that my kids don't hate what I do, because all it does is take me away from them.
Yeah, of course.
And that was happening for a very long time. My son only ever saw me between countries that I was traveling in and out of. And so help them to understand why it's such an important thing for us to carry it on, and to be proud. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. So thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I've just learned so much. I've got about another million questions about the Achuan style as well. That's where my dad's from. He's from Makumai.
Oh, okay.
My mum's from the swamp, from Abichu.
Yeah.
So I can definitely feel like I want to plug some of those ideas, because my brothers and I, two of my brothers that are here, they came back and did that kind of journey that I described. But I'd love to see, like, when I get my first one, whenever that is, having an understanding of actually this is another element that can be brought into it. I'd love to hear that. For people that want to catch up with you, for people that want to come in and see you or reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
Probably through our website, which is also, you can get the links on all of my socials, which is under Pacific Ink on Instagram, Facebook. And then through the website, I use the contact forms on the website because it helps me funnel everything. Right. Rather than checking Messenger for both my private and my business on 4 different platforms. That's good, yeah, basically the website is the best one. And it's usually because if I don't reply, it gives me another buzz. Yep. And they're like, remember that you said you would get back? And because I'm trying to get into this habit of when I'm out and about, not opening messages, because then I'll go, this is cool, I'll message you when I get back, and I just never do. Yes, I picture that too. And I always say to people, like, it's okay if you don't feel rude if you're like, hey, just wondering if you remembered that we were talking, because more than likely I've forgotten. Oh, good. Or it's just kind of passed by, especially when you're going through, I get quite a lot of anxiety going through all the messages. Yep. And I've found it's not uncommon to, for people in our trade to do this. Yep. Because it's overwhelming, because you're getting life stories by the mother load. And then I always say to people, when you're in front of me, yours is the most important one. Mm-hmm. But I can't be thinking about yours for the 5 months before you're even here. So contact me on that time. And that's the way I think I'll get the best result for yourself out of me. And COVID's been a funny one, because we haven't really known how to plan months and months in advance. Of course. Well, if it's any consolation, other artists that I've spoken to have exactly the same, operate exactly the same. Yeah. So it seems to be a thing. So it's pacificink.co.ck.com? No, so the website is Kariha Polynesian Art Studio.com. Cool. Which is a mouthful, and I realised that about 2 days after I sign for the domain. But that's why we have all the links on our socials as well.
Nice, and I'll put the links in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Awesome. Stormy Carter, thank you so much for sharing what you have shared. I know that you've got like reams more in there as well, but I really appreciate you taking the time to share with myself and anybody out there.
Awesome.
All right, mate, thank you. Thank you. Awesome.